Hi all, my name is Philip Montgomery. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person with you right now, but I am leaving this video in hopes that you enjoy my presentation. I'll share my screen right here and we will go through the presentation. My paper is called Agentive Teacher Collaboration on the Borders of CLIL and EMI. I did a study looking at 2 teachers in Kazakhstan who were tasked with integrating content and language type activities at a university that is moving towards EMI. It is a technical university, and they went through a workshop with some of us, and we worked on developing teachers' abilities to design CLIL informed lessons. And so this the study fits in the background of CLIL as this pedagogical approach that is filling, I think, a gap in EMI policies that aim that are not aiming enough to balance language and content objectives. So CLIL does this where EMI does not so much. The 2 subject teachers in my study, one is a STEM teacher and the other is an English teacher. And they are teachers which fall into this category of many teachers being underprepared to teach either in English or to teach the subject, the content subject like chemistry or engineering or math. And so in the literature, collaboration is pointed to very frequently as something recommended, but very rarely explored. And so my study has 3 research questions. What challenges do university STEM and ESPA teachers face delivering this EMI curriculum? What collaborative practices do STEM and ESP teachers experience? And how do teachers use collaboration to negotiate the challenges they face? To undertake this study, I used these 3 frameworks here, CLIL teacher identity, which sees teachers coming to the teaching task as carrying an identity associated with the subject they are teaching, and that might ask them to merge or rethink some of their priorities and values. Collaboration is a key idea that I took, which is defined as teachers working together to achieve some aim, and which takes place in a number of different ways. And the main framework here is teacher agency, which we'll talk about here in a minute. The study is an exploratory case study in which I had almost 3 hours of observations, these meetings between the teachers, conjoint interviews with the 2 focal participants, followed by an individual interview with an administrator to help triangulate some of the findings. I also asked them to journal throughout our time together, and they also shared personal communication via email and WhatsApp. I took all that and included document analysis of the syllabi, the workshops that they completed, and some departmental reports for me to understand a bit more holistically the environment in which they're working. I did a 3-part coding process, moving from open coding to selective coding to define some of the major themes that arose from this study, as well as the answers to those research questions. The most important part of my framework, I would say, is this teacher agency, which comes from Papa et al. 2019, and they talk about 3 different dimensions of teacher agency. And teacher agency in general, up here in the top right, are the choices and actions of teachers mediated by social and cultural constraints. And so those social and cultural constraints could come either in the classroom, if we look at pedagogical choices and actions that they have related to like materials that they can choose, activities that they can or cannot do, sociocultural choices and actions could be related to social structures like institutions and society at large, maybe the institution policies that affect them. And then down in the bottom right are the choices and actions related to colleagues and students outside of class. And so teacher collaboration falls under this relational category. And it's important to note that these choice and actions in each of these dimensions can either have resourcing effects or constraining effects, that they either give teachers more choices or they limit the amount of choices that teachers have in those spaces. And so let's meet our participants and see some of the findings that I have. So Galina here in the middle, and I do have permission to share their images. All of the courses were taught on Zoom, as we all are these days. And she is a mid-career English teacher, and both she and Natasha, who you'll meet on the next slide, talked about the challenges they face with supporting, motivating, and engaging students. They had to survive the institution's observation culture, and they found that a lot of the educational policies were shifting at moment's notice. They found themselves struggling with those. The quote here talks about that observation culture and how Galina says, I would come to Natasha to help her improve. She would give advice to her colleague in the way that they attended each other's lessons. But then with those people, and she's talking about her administrators, when they come to your lessons, it is to find faults and to criticize for your faults. And so for these two teachers who had worked together for several years, and in the time that I worked with them, were co-teaching one of the classes. You see here, they're struggling with engaging students. You have one student on the phone, another student not really engaging much with class, and a lot of students with their cameras off. And they talked about how their relationship helped them to find ways to support and engage students. Natasha is the other focal participant. She's a mid-career professor of English, of chemical engineering, and she was needing to begin teaching in English. And so she was finding ways to share resources with Galina. And so I asked them about what are some of the benefits they got from working together. So Natasha's answers here on the left, she talked about the way that she learned lots of English expressions, how to communicate effectively. And then Galina, in turn, learned from Natasha as this researcher who's much more widely published and has a lot more experience in research writing. And so they had this reciprocal relationship that I found helped them to navigate some of the challenges. And as they taught together, they found ways to engage their students a little bit more. And so this collaboration that they experienced was a way for them to negotiate student needs by seeking and giving constructive advice. You remember Galina on the last slide talked about giving advice to Natasha about English and pronunciation, how to speak correctly. And then they also were able to use each other as a form of support in terms of negotiating institutional power imbalances. And they fostered this reciprocity that let them support each other in face of some of these constraining forces from their institution. And so this final diagram, I think, summarizes nicely. In relation to those three categories, I found a lot of constraining effects in the terms of pedagogical agency and in terms of sociocultural agency. So the low student engagement, low student proficiency were things that constrain them a lot. You see that kind of constricting focus here. And that socioculturally, in terms of their environment that they're in, there were these constraining forces with ever-changing curricula and this punitive observation culture. However, in relational agency, where Natasha and Galina could work together and share experience, they in turn gave themselves more opportunities. They had more choices. And I think the biggest two parts of these are the meaningful collaboration. They had worked together in the past. They attended workshops together, led workshops together, and they had, a reciprocal relationship that I think is important and not mentioned, I don't think, enough in the literature on collaboration and especially among CLIL teachers. And so to conclude, the major implications that I think this study brings to light is the fact that teachers should foster collaborative relationships with like-minded teachers, that you should build on relationships that you already have and foster genuine collaborative relationships, because those are the ones that are going to resource your choices and abilities in face of larger constraints in other parts of your job. Program administrators, I think, might do well to keep teacher experiences in mind. Things like the punitive observation culture that does not help teachers, and the expectations on teachers that may be a bit over the top, a bit too demanding, and find ways to help teachers to engage positively with each other in the field. And finally, I think that more research is needed, especially with less engaged teachers. These teachers were characterized by the administrators as outliers. This was not normal in their working environment. And so I think that it would be helpful to see a similar type of study with teachers who are less engaged, or teachers who, on a wider scale, might have more of a variety of experiences. And so we could get more nuance in terms of how this relational agency is acting. So thank you for your time. I hope that we can leave comments or questions in the presentation, and feel free to get them to me that way. Some references are here if you'd like to pause the video. Okay, so thank you very much.